The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question to the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is now in session. It is Christmas Eve 2024, and I hope every single one of you that are watching this right now are having a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa. I don't really care. I hope everybody is having a great time right now this holiday season. Literally, be there for your family, friends, pets, whatever. This is the time of the year to really be with those who you love and care for. And with that being said, let's talk about the situation within Ukraine. So first of all, we're not going to actually talk about the front. First, we're going to talk about Deep State UA. Now, love him or hate him, Deep State UA is one of the most credible, most accurate, and most vital sources in the Russo-Ukrainian war. We need Deep State. And without them, literally the balance of I don't know, like bias or something within the media when it comes to like reporting gains or losses for Russia or Ukraine completely goes in the favor of Russia. Like, I'm of the opinion that we need sources like Deep State to report the facts and just the facts. Rather, if it's good news for Ukraine, bad news for Ukraine, or good news for Russia, bad news for Russia, it doesn't matter. Deep State is literally the thing that balances everything out. And without them, it is complete chaos and disinformation literally ruling the day. Now, Deep State does make mistakes, and they do get kind of copy, especially after what happened in Makarivka here. Like, look at this. They literally put everything in an encirclement here, even though it was quite obvious at that point that they left the village. But a couple days later, when they came back, this was corrected, fortunately. And now everything is straightened out for the most part, even though there is a rumor that the team at Deep State is no longer ran by the same people, which wouldn't really surprise me at all. But still, the fact that Deep State was nearly shut down for like a couple days or so is a major crime against literally like the truth in this war. And the Ukrainian government should be ashamed of themselves for trying to censor and for trying to literally hide the reality of the situation on the front. Shame on them. And I hope they get coal for Christmas. But fortunately though, Deep State is back, even though, again, I don't know if it's the same group of people that is updating the map every day. Who knows? But I'm glad that they're still around. And we need them. As I literally said minutes ago, we need them. But anyway, yeah, let's talk about the situation in Ukraine. And as you can see, there's a lot of gains here in the Donetsk direction, or region, that is. And yeah, let's start off. Let's go into the Syriac map right now. And yeah, let's go to the same province. So first of all, or actually no, let's not talk about Donetsk direction. And instead, let's talk about Kherson. Now, there have been rumors and reports as of late that are speculating that next year or so, the Russians are going to start an offensive, a counteroffensive, to retake the city of Kherson from the Ukrainians. Now, I don't really know how credible this is, but considering that the Russians have recently been on the offensive to retake the left bank Dnieper River village of Dachi lately, it wouldn't really shock me if they attempted to cross, but I don't really seem to see enough evidence for that. And it seems kind of crazy and out of character for the Russians to do that. But it wouldn't shock me, especially if the Russians start to have more major success in both Zaporozhye and Dnipropetrovsk regions next year, which I'm expecting the Russians to enter the latter, by the way, also in January or February 2025. But yeah, as of right now, I don't really see them crossing the river, especially after what the Ukrainians tried to do with Krynki. It was a logistic nightmare for the Ukrainians. And for that reason alone, I just don't see the Russians doing it. Now, there have been rumors that the Ukrainians will attempt a counteroffensive on the city of Energodar. But again, I just don't see enough evidence for it. Though they have been advancing in the southern direction and taking more of the Russian-occupied part of Kamyansky and trying to advance towards the town of Vasilivka. But there's, again, like, I don't know about this. Kind of a logistics problem, if you ask me, because not only is this area kind of wide and flattened, which is easy for the Russians to grind down, but also there's some bridges here, which the Russians would obviously blow up to ensure that the Ukrainians wouldn't get that far. But also, don't forget, this is one of the most heavily fortified areas in all of eastern Ukraine. And yeah, I just don't see Ukrainians advancing downward here unless there's a major collapse of Russian forces like it was in Kharkiv and Kherson regions. I just don't see it. But time will tell. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, who knows. The Russians have also been advancing a little northwards from the Robotine direction. And there have been some speculation that they will start an offensive on Orkiv next year. But again, like the other directions, I'm not too sure about this one, but it wouldn't shock me because Orkiv is like one of the key pieces here for the Russians to take control of all of Zaporozhye Oblast, and not just simply the areas that they have right now in the south, with Melitopol, Berdyansk, Vasilivka, and Tokmak. They definitely gotta get more control of Zaporozhye Oblast if they want to cement their legitimacy in eastern Ukraine. They have to. But anyway, I'm done with that. Let's talk about the most important direction, which is Donetsk Oblast. So first of all, let's talk about the Velika Novosilka direction. Now, oh boy, this was back when I had the voice changer intact. We are almost back to where it all began in summer 2023. The Russians have pretty much retaken most, if not all, of the parts that they lost during the summer 2023 counteroffensive. Like literally, the last video of 2024, as we speak, which, by the way, will in fact be the last video of this year. It all ends where it all began in 2023 when I made my first video, which was this direction here, the Velika Novosilka direction. The Russians have not only retaken Starmaisky and Orzhany, but they've retaken Rivonopil, most of Novodorivka, and also they have now retaken the villages of Makarovka and Storozhive. The Ukrainians were allegedly encircled in these two villages, but then the Ukrainians ran away, and I guess they fled north either to Dnipropetrovsk or have evacuated altogether from this direction and went to other areas in the Zaporozhye direction, or maybe they went to Velika Novosilka. But anyway, I don't want to speculate too much. But yeah, so yeah, the Ukrainians have lost what they gained during last year's WoW offensive that failed. And yeah, it's pretty much now almost back to what it was in summer 2023 for the Russians. Like, they're literally back to where they left off. And they're also about to regain control, which is inevitable, the village of Niskuchne. And once they retake this village, Rimivka and Velika Novosilka will be within sight. And there's even reports speculating, at least now with Deep State back online, that the Russians have now all but cut the road, the last actual road, to Velika Novosilka and Rimivka. With this road cut, it's all but GG for Velika Novosilka. The town is most likely going to fall very soon, though I don't know when. I honestly don't think it's going to fall until January 2025, at least at the earliest, because, I don't know, I honestly think the holiday season is sort of playing a role here. Maybe the Russians are trying to maybe take some time off or something. But I honestly don't think they're really taking time off, and if anything, they're just more focused at the moment of grinding down the Ukrainians that are still in Velika Novosilka. But let it be assured, with the recent news of Storozhive and Makarivka being retaken by the Russians, along with this road being cut off here, it's only a matter of time before Velika Novosilka falls, and it's also only a matter of time before we see the Russian entry into Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. And speaking of which, let's also talk about the situation on the Kharkov front, or Kharkov. Sorry if I sort of mispronounced it for a brief second, but you all probably get the point what I'm saying here. But anyway, Konstantinopolski has been taken by Russia completely, along with the villages of Sukiali and Zelenivka. And the Russians are also getting close to the village of Constantinople and Olaki. And they've also taken completely, I don't know if I said this in the last video, but they've taken complete control over the village of Uspinovka and are advancing very well right now in the city or town of Kurakove. Now, as of making this video, in fact, this will be the last video I will make for this entire year. Kurakove, for the most part, around 2 to 3 quarters of it. No, I think it's 3/4 at this point, literally at this point. Even though Suryak has not painted this area here, pretty much all of the relevant areas of Kurakove are under Russian control. The eastern parts, the outskirts, the farming areas, the commie blocks, literally everything except for the power plant here is all under Russian control. So Kurakove, de facto wise, is pretty much under Russian control at this point. It has fallen, and the Russians even flew their flag at the Central Rada building, which is basically where the mayor would be, I guess. But yeah, you probably understand what I'm saying here. But yeah, Kurakove has fallen to Russia, pretty much, and the pocket that was like west of Beretsky has fallen, along with the entirety of Samsivka and Stary Turny. They have now all completely fallen to Russia, and Kurakove is not only like almost encircled, but it's pretty much now under fire control at this point by the Russians. And yeah, even though the town itself is already under partial Russian control, the last part, the power plant area, is still not under Russian control yet, along with the outskirt village of Dachny. Now, going a little north, the Russians have also made gains in the villages of Ukrainka, Novoolinkivka, and the village of Novogilazivka, and are also advancing outside of the village of Novotroitsky, and are advancing on the villages of Solony and Vovkove, and are also now battling it out with the Ukrainians for the village of Bischine. And with this, along with the near taking of the villages of Vidrodzenia, along with most of Dachinsky, we can conclude that the Battle of Pokrovsk is very close, and it's only a matter of time before the Ukrainians will either have to pull back, or perhaps they can do an Artyomovsk/Bakhmut-like last stand battle. Now, the way I see things, I don't think the Russians want to destroy Pokrovsk. I think after what happened in Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, whatever you call it, the Russians want to avoid that scenario. And I think what they're going to do, as I said in the previous videos I made, they are going to flank Pokrovsk by taking this road here, the T0406 road, and also taking the E50 road. And by doing this, the Ukrainians will have no choice, virtually no choice, but to depart Pokrovsk with their tails, like, literally wrangled. They will have no choice but to leave. And also, the Russians are now 8 kilometers away, or 8 kilometers away from Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. This is literally the closest they've been to Dnipropetrovsk in a very long time. Like, they're insanely close now. And I believe as soon as they take more of these villages here, I think the thing that is preventing Russia from entering is Velika Novosilka and Andriivka here, which is this farming village. Once they take these two areas here, these two settlements, then the Russians are going to be knocking at the gates of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and the Ukrainians, right now as we speak, are already building fortifications, digging trenches. they know the Russians are on the way, and Southern Donetsk Oblast is all but lost at this point. Everybody knows it. I know it. Even pro-Ukraine people know it. The campaign in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast is going to start in early 2025. Now, how long will this campaign last? I don't know. Perhaps it will last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, who knows? But all I can say for certain going into next year is that the Russians are getting ready for the campaign into Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. They are absolutely preparing, without a doubt. They're going to enter it, and it will make Zelensky look like a total ass because he claimed literally that Ukraine has been winning for a long time, but if the Russians enter Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, it will be a massive PR blow to not only his image, but it will also break the illusion in general that Ukraine is winning the war. It absolutely will be. Now, also, let's talk about the situation in the Toretsk direction. The Russians have been making some steady gains in the villages of Leonidivka and also the suburban villages of Novospassky and Shishir-Benivka. The Zabolka district, for the most part, is under Russian control, and nearly 3/4 of Toretsk city is now also under Russian control. And also, the Central Rada building in Toretsk is also now under Russian control. So now they can essentially claim, hey guys, we have Toretsk under our control. You can now go, leave, prepare for the Battle of Konstantinivka. But no, the Ukrainians are still holding on to 25% of the city, but the important areas, which include the industrial areas here, the telecons or the landfill junkyards, and all of the commie blocks here in the center area and also in the eastern area are now all under Russian control. And I predict that by maybe the end of January 2025 or early February 2025, the Battle of Toretsk will be over. The Russians will have won. And then we're going to start seeing the push towards Konstantinivka and perhaps the finishing of the Battle of Chasiv Yar. And speaking of which, the Russians tried to enter this industrial zone here in Chasiv Yar, but have been pushed out by the Ukrainians. But on the other side, though, of things, like on the contrary, the Russians have started entering northern Chasiv Yar and have so far have not had any issues in like holding on to their gains there. So it's possible that the Ukrainians could get flanked and perhaps encircled from the north, while the Russians perhaps may try again from the south. But time will tell. I honestly don't think the battle for Chasiv Yar is going to end until maybe February or March 2025 at the latest. But rest assured, we are nearing the decisive phase for that battle. And again, it's going to conclude with a Russian victory, most likely. And then we go to the Liman direction. The Russians have mostly paused any operations towards these outskirt towns and villages of Liman, but they are, however, on the brink of taking control at long last, or retaking complete control of the village of Terny from the armed forces of Ukraine. Most of Terny, as of right now, as we can speak, is under Russian control, but I do not expect the full capture to be done again until next month, which will be in 2025. But rest assured, the battle for Terny is almost over, and again, Ukrainians are going to lose. Now, let's talk about a certain direction that has been heating up as of late, and a direction that I really recommend all of you to keep an eye on, and that is the Kharkiv direction. Or many would say the Kupiansk direction because it's on the Oskar River. The Ukrainians have attempted and have successfully kicked out the Russians from the village of Kolesnikivka. But however, though, the Russians have made gains and have taken most control over the village of Zarizhove and are advancing further down south, eventually towards the town of Borova here, which is an important part of the entire Kupiansk front and is vital for Ukrainians in this direction. If they lose Borova, then not only will the Russians will have a way to get to Izium, but they will also be able to solidify their control of the Lugansk Oblast from any further Ukrainian incursions. The battle for the Oskar River is nearing the end, and again, the Russians have control of the situation. And Lazova, this village here, has fallen to the Russians here, and I do think this is going to generate a Pischine-like situation like we saw here in fall or summer 2024, and I believe this will also help with their push towards Borova. Now, let's talk about Kupiansk itself. Nothing in the city itself, but we do have interesting developments up north in the town of Dorichina. Now, the Russians have entered and have successfully consolidated their gains in Dvorichina and have taken control around 25 to 30% of the town and are now already in the town center of this settlement here. Now, if they were able to take control of this, then we can expect the Russians to not only go up north and try to solidify their gains on the Oskar River, but also to start a greater offensive in the Kharkiv direction, which would, of course, be from these bordering areas here, but also from the town of Volchansk. And speaking of which, the Ukrainians still have control over the industrial area here, but as far as I know, at least according to AMK mapping, even though Syriac has not called these areas, the Russians have regained the momentum in Volchansk, and it doesn't look like the Ukrainians are going to kick them out anytime soon. And also, there's a report that the Russians have retaken control, even though Syriac has not confirmed it yet, that the Russians have retaken control over the village of Staritsia, which pushes them back south of this river here, or these villages, and the Ukrainians are forced back into these forested areas in the Kharkiv region. Now, nothing really going on in this area here, which would be towards Zolochiv, and nothing going on in the Sumy Oblast, even though the Russians are in Sumy again. But in the Kursk region, which has been the site of a major Ukrainian PR offensive, the Ukrainians are losing more and more land that they had gained control over during their infamous August-September offensive against the Russian army in the Kursk Oblast. Pretty much most, if not around half, if not 60% of the areas that they controlled in Kursk are now under the control of the Russians again, especially the town or village of Plikovo, and the Russians have also crossed the river here, the Pesel River, and are on the outskirts of the town or village of Guivo, and are also on the brink of taking over the village of Kurilovka. Now, if the Russians are able to take these two villages here, they can reach the border again with the Ukrainians in the Sumy Oblast, and perhaps maybe even enter it once again, and also maybe try to encircle the Ukrainians here. The Ukrainians, as of right now, are still controlling and are still settled in Suja as of right now, but their time, as we speak, is running out, especially with the news that the Russians are advancing from the western direction and are now on the brink of entering the strategic village of Malia Lakhnia. And if the Russians are able to take Malia Lakhnia, pretty much the Ukrainians that are in these areas here will be forced to return to Suja or to completely withdraw from the entirety of their Kursk pocket, which will then basically solidify a major defeat for the armed forces of Ukraine in their bid to not only regain the initiative over the Russians, but to also deal a humiliating blow to Vladimir Putin, who has been trying to get the Ukrainians to not only submit, but to agree to terms on his conditions, by the way, in how a Russian victory would look in Ukraine. So yeah, but yeah, that's pretty much it. The Russians are regaining the areas that they lost during summer 2024, and the Russians are gaining across the entire front line, and even in Kherson, by the way. So yeah, that's going to do it for Ukraine. But before I end the video, I want to mention that going to 2025, expect more coverage on the Syrian civil war as news of the SDF and the Islamist government in Syria are continuing to escalate. Like, literally, both sides have not agreed to a proper ceasefire or political solution that would end the conflict in northern Syria, even though most of Syria, though, is now comfortably under Islamist control, though there have been some incidents of guerrilla fighting by Alawite soldiers who once served in the former Syrian army under Bashar al-Assad. But it seems that the main conflict next year in Syria will be in the north, to retake the areas of eastern Deir ez-Zor and El Raqqa, and perhaps El Hasaka too, and also Kobani. But yeah, so keep an eye out on Syria, and also keep an eye out on Yemen, because it seems now with the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime, along with the troubling news that is coming out of Lebanon, expect the war in Yemen to also potentially resume too in 2025. In fact, we've actually heard news that the STC forces, which are a proxy of the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, have started an offensive in the Taiz governorate to potentially make the Houthis fold back from, I guess, the city of Taiz completely, but also to gain, I guess, I don't know, I guess a bigger leverage over them in negotiations to implement a permanent ceasefire in Yemen, to perhaps permanently end the conflict there for good, and also expect the Sudanese civil war to also further escalate, and also expect the war, like civil war in Myanmar, to also escalate. I mean, expect a lot of armed conflicts that we've already seen before in 2024 further escalate next year. Like, expect nothing but non-stop action. So yeah, maybe you'll get more videos from me next year, maybe not. Who knows? Time will tell. I hope all of you enjoyed today's video, guys. I hope every single one of you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I will see you all in 2025. This is me signing out, and I hope all of you have a great one. So take care, and peace out. Goodbye.